We're pretty big Jedi defenders on this channel, as you probably know. Within the Star Wars universe, the Jedi were entirely correct, philosophically speaking, and most of their failures stemmed from imperfect execution of their philosophy or impossible situations. But while the prequel era Jedi largely did the best they could given the circumstances, there was another era in which the Jedi totally and utterly failed the galaxy, and it was entirely their fault. In this video, we'll be telling the story of these Jedi and why they needed to fall at the end of the Old Sith Wars. This video is brought to you by Privacy.com. Privacy lets you buy things online using virtual cards instead of having to use real ones, protecting your identity and bank information on the internet. Right now, new customers are able to get $5 to spend on their first purchase. Go to privacy.com/Geetsly to sign up now. Nothing is more corrupted than a Jedi Order that doesn't let you have privacy and control your finance. With features such as bank masking and transparent card control that allows you to decide who can actually charge your card, it's really a no-brainer. You can even go that step further and set spending limits per month so you make sure no galactic dating service accidentally bills you twice or upgrades you to another service without your consent. Privacy.com also has different plans catered to your personal or business goals, so make sure you go to privacy.com/Geetsly to check them out and sign up for an account. Everyone who signs up will get $5 to spend on their first purchase. Go to privacy.com/Geetsly and register today. 4,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the galaxy was embroiled in the Old Sith Wars, a series of devastating conflicts that nearly destroyed the Republic several times over. In the first of these wars, the Great Sith War, the Jedi Order was devastated by wartime losses, the fall of many apprentices, and the destruction of their homeworld, Ossus. As the Order regrouped on Coruscant and began to recover, it underwent a series of reforms under a new Jedi High Council, which centralized the Order for fear of the dark side. Both the Jedi and the Republic hoped there wouldn't be another conflict like the Great Sith War for many years, but unfortunately, neither of them were that lucky. Just a few decades after the end of the Great Sith War, the Mandalorian Wars began. Once more, the Outer Rim burned as the Mandalorian Neo-Crusaders cut a bloody swath across the Republic. The Republic military crumbled before them, and in desperation, the Senate called on the Jedi Order for aid. But the Jedi did nothing. The Council thought that the Order was still too weak from the Great Sith War to get involved, and they were weary of war driving their students to the dark side once more. They believed the threat of the dark side lurked behind the threat of the Mandalorians, and that the Jedi would fall right into its trap if they went to war again. They claimed neutrality and left the Republic to die. As you can imagine, however, a good many Jedi thought this was asinine. They were led by a pair of young knights named Revan and Malak, who at length rallied their followers and went to war anyway. The Revankists, as these Jedi Crusaders were called, took command of the Republic military and beat the Mandalorians, who were ultimately defeated in the Battle of Malachor V. All the while, the Jedi Council continued to do nothing, lending neither the Revankists nor the Republic support as they fought one of the most grueling wars in galactic history. Many of the Revanchists died during the Mandalorian Wars. The rest vanished, following Revan and Malak into the unknown regions after Malachor V. All save one, that is, Meetra Surik, the Jedi General who had part-commanded Republic forces at Malachor, instead returned to Coruscant to face the judgment of the Jedi Council. Surik believed she did the right thing in joining the Mandalorian Wars, but even after all that happened, after the Republic came so close to destruction, the Jedi Council disagreed. During Surik's trial, the Masters on the Council treated her with nothing but contempt. Furthermore, the Council sensed that something terrible had happened to Surik. She had lost her connection to the Force at Malachor V due to the terrible shock of that last battle. Surik was broken, both in her connection to the Force and as a person. The Jedi were horrified, as they believed it was impossible for someone to cut themselves off from the Force like that and survive. But instead of re-examining their views, they determined that the wound in the Force within her was a threat, some product of the dark side instead of something to be studied. Instead of trying to help Meetra Surik, who alone among the Revanchists had willingly returned to face them, they exiled her. Just a year later, the rest of the Revanchists returned, now an army of dark Jedi at the helm of a new Sith Empire. Even though the Jedi Order had refused to go to war against the Mandalorians, they immediately joined the Republic in the war against these new Sith. The Council believed Revan's Sith were the threat waiting behind the Mandalorians that they had sensed during the prior war, and claimed that the fall of the Revanchists was proof that they had been right all along. They saw the war with these Sith, the Jedi Civil War, through to its end, ultimately helping the Republic triumph. But this came at a tremendous cost to the Jedi. Countless Jedi Knights fell in battle during the Jedi Civil War, countless more joined the Sith. By the war's end, there were only 100 Jedi left in the entire galaxy, fewer than those who survived Order 66. Just a few years after the end of the Jedi Civil War, those numbers began to decline even further. A Sith triumvirate had risen from the ruins of Revan's Sith, and they struck at the Jedi from the shadows, carrying out the first Jedi Purge. Darth Sion and his Sith assassins hunted down and murdered individual Jedi, while Darth Nihilus killed large groups wherever they gathered. After most of the surviving Jedi were killed by Nihilus at Qatar in 3952 BBY, the Jedi Order disbanded, and the few who were left went into hiding. Of the Masters on the Jedi Council, 5 remained after Qatar. There was Atris, the Jedi Archivist, Vruk Lamar, a crotchety Jedi known for his extreme orthodoxy, Zez-Kai, an elusive and introspective master, Kavar, the Jedi Weapons Master, and Lona Vash, who had been one of the first to condemn Mitra Surik at her trial. By chance or by will of the Force, all 5 of these masters had history with Mitra Surik, and all had voted to exile her at her trial. These Jedi found themselves completely outmatched. The Sith Triumvirate was an enemy they didn't understand, one that worked from the shadows, only showing itself when it could leave no witnesses. They determined that the only way to stop it was to draw it out into the open, and to do that, they decided to make it seem as if the Jedi had been completely wiped out. Each of the Jedi Masters went into self-imposed exile on war-torn worlds, reflecting on how the galaxy had fallen so far. Zez-Kai hid among the refugees of Nar Shaddaa, while Kavar secretly joined the royal court on Onderon. Vruk Lamar set up a camp in the ruins of Dantooine's Jedi Enclave, while Lona Vash did the same in Korriban's Sith Academy. Each waited for the Sith to reveal themselves, and also for Mitra Surik to return from her exile. While the Jedi didn't understand much about these new Sith, they were able to piece together one thing. They were somehow connected to the exile. These new Sith, they determined, were related to the wound in the Force Surik carried within her, the scar left by Malachor V. Because of this, they guessed that Surik would be essential in stopping them. In time, Mitra Surik did indeed return to the galaxy at large, and after learning about what had happened to the Jedi Order, she set out on a quest to find these lost Jedi and bring the fight to the Sith. She sought out and met with Zez-Kai, Vruk Lamar, and Kavar. Lona Vash was instead found first by Darth Sion, who killed her. The 3 surviving Jedi Masters agreed to meet with Surik in the Enclave on Dantooine to determine a course of action. You'll notice that we only mentioned 4 Jedi Masters there. That's because Atris, the 5th, went off on her own. She established her own Jedi Academy hidden on the ruined surface of Telos 4, where she and her Ichani handmaidens hid from the galaxy, guarding a collection of Jedi and Sith artifacts. We'll get back to her later. By the time the surviving Jedi Masters gathered on Dantooine, they'd had plenty of time to reflect on what had gone wrong in the past decade and a half. The truth was, everything that had gone wrong was their fault. During the Mandalorian Wars, they were so focused on the potential threat of the dark side that they failed to see the present threat of the Mandalorians. They failed to provide guidance to the Revanchists during the war, leading them to embrace the dark side. They failed to see that the Revanchists fell because of the shortcomings of their teachings, and they failed to improve their ways, leading more Jedi to fall during the Jedi Civil War. They failed to reach out to Mitra Surik to try and understand the wound created at Malachor, and thus their order was destroyed by Sith created by the very same wound. For fear of the dark side, they allowed it to fester and destroy trillions of lives, and even after that, they failed to even try to understand the threat they faced. On Dantooine, they had a chance to repent and make up for these failures. Once again, Mitra Surik came before the Council of her own free will and offered what she had learned of the Force and the wound in it. But once more, the Jedi Masters rejected what she brought to the table and voted to exile her. For this, All three were killed by Kreia, who had been following the exile in the hope that the Jedi would see the error of their ways.
As you would pass judgment on her, I have come to pass judgment on you all. Do you wish to feel the teachings born of the Mandalorian Wars, of all tragedies that scream across the galaxy? Let me show you, you who have forever seen the galaxy through the Force. See it through the eyes of the exile.
But there was one last Jedi Master out there, one that did not come to Dantooine, Atris. Atris had gone much further down the rabbit hole than any of the other Jedi Masters had. While the others simply failed to accept their mistakes, Atris sought to blame others for them, especially Meetra Surik. She was bitter over what she saw as Surik's betrayal, bitter over the fall of the Jedi Order, and bitter that Surik's help would be needed to stop the Sith. Atris became so bitter and so wrapped up in the Jedi orthodoxy that she fell to the dark side. She surrounded herself with Sith holocrons, telling herself that her study of the Sith would help her destroy the Sith. In truth, she was becoming a Sith herself. Atris was the last surviving member of the Jedi Council of this era, and she was one of the Jedi Order's greatest failures. She was ultimately defeated by Meetra Surik. With the fall of Atris, there were no Jedi Masters left, and the few Jedi that remained from the Old Order were still in hiding. For all intents and purposes, the Jedi Order had been destroyed, but the destruction of the Jedi Order was necessary for it allowed the Order to be rebuilt. Meetra Surik had gone out looking for the Lost Jedi, and in the end, she found them. But they weren't the Masters of the Old Council. They were Aton Rand, a former assassin running from his guilt, Michael, an initiate that had never been taken as a Padawan, Mira, a bounty hunter who had never taken a life, Visas Ma, a former slave of the Sith, and Bao-Dur, a man haunted by what he had done in the Mandalorian Wars. They were lost souls, each strong in the Force, who, in time, learned from their mistakes and those of each other. With the help of the exile, they became Jedi, and they, not the Masters, were the ones from whom the Jedi Order was rebuilt. So that's the story of the iteration of the Jedi Order that needed to be burned down. But what do you think? Would you like a video looking more into any of these individual Jedi specifically? Let us know all that and more in the comments section below. As always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.